Hi everybody. This is the introduction and all like the little stuff at the beginning of the book of Friedrich Pollock, the Éminence Grise of the Frankfurt School by Philipp Lenhard. Éminence Grise means gray eminence. Éminence Grise means gray eminence.
Éminence Grise.
Éminence Grise means gray eminence. According to Wikipedia, an Éminence Grise or gray eminence is a powerful decision maker or advisor who operates, quote, behind the scenes, end quote, or in a non-public or unofficial capacity. The phrase originally referred to François Leclerc du Tremblay, the right-hand man of Cardinal Richelieu. Not sure to pronounce that guy's name. I should. Important figure in history, but the de facto ruler of France. Leclerc was a Capuchin friar who was renowned for his beige robe attire, as beige was termed, quote, gray, end quote, in that era. The style, His Eminence, is used to address or refer to a cardinal in the Catholic Church. Although Leclerc never achieved the rank of cardinal, those around Leclerc addressed Leclerc as such in deference to the great influence this, quote, gray, end quote, friar held over, quote, His Eminence the Cardinal, end quote. As a result, the term gray cardinal has occasionally been used to express the same concept. Leclerc is referred to in several popular works. Aldous Huxley wrote an English biography of Leclerc entitled Grey Eminence. There is also the 1873 painting by Jean-Léon Gérôme L'Éminence Grise, which depicts him descending the grand staircase of the Palais Cardinal and the deference shown to him by others present. The cleric is referred to in Alexandre Dumas' The Three Musketeers, as the character Father Joseph, a powerful associate of Richelieu, and one to be feared. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing all these names right.
Pollock.
Pollock.
Pollock. Pollock. Pollock.
Pollock. And make sure I'm pronouncing this guy's name right.
Philipp Lenhard.
Philipp Lenhard. Okay, so that's the title. Jesus Christ. Okay. I swear the rest of the book isn't going to be this painful to listen to. I want to read the table of contents, introduction, origins, a friend for life, failed revolution, quote, scientific, end quote, Marxism, the quest, dusk, practical relief work, émigré, a new order, question mark, dinner at the White House, return, question mark, new old Germany, automation, and old age, epilogue. There's also a chronology at the end. This is the preface to the English edition. The publication of this revised English edition of my Pollock biography seems particularly appropriate in light of the Frankfurt School's own transatlantic history. In the last half-century, U.S. academics have produced crucial works on the history of critical theory. That the relevant Anglophone and German language literature all too often lead independent lives is not least down to issues of translation. It is all the more gratifying to see my book come out in English, just as I myself relocate from Bavaria to California. I should like to thank the many friends, colleagues, and institutions who have made this possible. In the first instance, I am grateful to the editors of the Historical Materialism book series, notably Sebastian Budgen, Lauren Balhorn, for agreeing to publish my book, Danny Hayward for assistance, and Simon Musel for his copy editing. At Brill, Athena Dimitriou, Jennifer Obdam, and Jason Prevost have been enormously helpful throughout. I am grateful to Nora Mercurio and Elena Cascio of the Surkamp Verlag for their unwavering support in facilitating this English language edition. I am also indebted to Martin J. for acting as an independent reader. Not least, I thank Lars Fischer, who, by rendering not only an excellent translation, but also making numerous helpful suggestions, has gone far beyond the call of duty. The publication of this book would have been impossible without the generous financial support of the History Department at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. Indeed, the department has played an indispensable role in recent years in facilitating, fostering, and advancing my research. I am particularly grateful to single out just one of my colleagues, to Wolfgang Piret. I owe an abundance of intellectual stimulation and academic experience to my colleagues and students in Munich, notably to Michael Brenner, Daniel Mala, Julia Schneiderwind, Evita Wieski at the Institute of Jewish History and Culture. Finally, I am grateful to Detlef Clausen. I have a piece by Detlef Clausen on this channel. He wrote the introduction. What did he write? Detlef Clausen wrote like the last piece in one of Marcel Stutzler's books on anti-Semitism, one of his edited volumes. Finally, I'm grateful to Detlef Clausen, Peter Mischung, Jörg Spetter, Pollock's, quote, godson, end quote, Stefan Kux, and Horkheimer and Pollock's lift boy at the Kur Hotel, Badischer Hof in Baden-Baden for sharing further knowledge and impressions of Pollock with me since the publication of the German edition. Signed, Munich/Berkeley, November 2022. Acknowledgements. I would have been unable to complete this book without a great deal of help from various quarters. Above all, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Michael Brenner for his many years of support. Michael Brenner. My stay as a visiting scholar at the University of California in Berkeley, funded by the DAAD, was of crucial importance to this project. I'm enormously grateful to Martin J. for our many engaging discussions about Friedrich Pollock, and, far from least, for his granting me access to his private collection. I was also able to spend a significant amount of time at the Deutsches Literaturarchiv in Marbach, allowing me to consult the papers of numerous relevant individuals and devote a significant amount of time to the manuscript. I particularly thank Caroline Jessen for her support in this context. It's probably actually Carolina Jessen. Throughout the years I've spent working on this book, Matthias Yen, Oliver Kleppel, and Stephen Rupert of the Archivzentrum at the University Library in Frankfurt/Main have met my every need. Furio Cerruti, Carlo Campani, Maria Enrica Vadala helped me with the still relatively unknown corpus of Pollock's papers now held by the University Library in Florence. I am also indebted to Carol A. Ledenham of the Hoover Institution in Stanford, Robert Bierschneider of the Munich State Archive, Johann Ries of the Baden-Württemberg State Archive, Hans-Peter Widmann of the State Archive in Freiburg, Breisgau, Claudius Stein of the University Archive in Munich, Melissa McCullen of the Special Collections and Archives sections at SUNY Albany, and the colleagues of the New York City Municipal Archives, the Leo Baeck Institute in New York, and the Association de Genealogia Judea de Argentina. I fucking brutalized that. Christine Broit, Liliana Ruth Firestein, and Carlos Abraham Weil assisted me in tracing the Argentinian Pollocks. I thank John Abramite, Nicole La Emery, Jan Gerber, Sander Gilman, Jürgen Habermas, Dirk Heiserer, Hans-Dieter Huber, Doris Maha-Kruger, Johannes Platz, Gregor Zunka Schneider, Bernd Zerger, Andrea Zinn, and Jörg Spetter for a variety of helpful pointers. Alex Gruber, Hartmut Lenhard, Janina Lenhard, Niklas Mahunsky, and Elizabeth Ubelmann were kind enough to read parts of the manuscript at different stages, and I am enormously grateful for their valuable comments. Prelude. The large heavy wooden table in the middle of the dining room is laid out for 17. It is just before 8 on the evening of Friday the 5th, February 1943. The location is central D.C. It is freezing outside, but the room is well heated. The flickering of the candles is reflected in the sparkling wine glasses. The napkins, artfully turned into standing fans, now lie folded casually next to the plates. Staff are serving the various courses: oysters, roast ham with pineapple, various vegetables as side dishes, salad and cheese, and the aroma of good food lies in the air. One of the guests has clearly made an effort to dress for the occasion. He is wearing a three-piece suit and a bow tie. Through his black-rimmed spectacles, his gaze rests on the woman sitting opposite, whom he seems to be quietly lecturing. He reinforces his words with hand gestures designed to demonstrate his confidence. Even so, he does not seem to be entirely at ease. Looking at him amicably, with her blue eyes, his interlocutor is listening attentively and occasionally nods in agreement. She is wearing a loosely fitting but high-necked dress in pearls. Occasionally, the resolute woman, who is nearing 60, looks to the right, where her husband is absent-mindedly eating his meal. Her husband is the 32nd President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was his wife, Eleanor, who invited the guests now attending the plush dinner party. Her nephew and the Roosevelt's daughter-in-law, Ruth Josephine, are also in attendance. The group includes 4 naturalized German guests who seem oddly out of place. They have come to present their plans for post-war economic reconstruction. Also in attendance is Vice President Henry A. Wallace, who subsequently noted that 2 of the guests, quote, Lowe and Pollock, were Jews. It is unclear how or why he knew this. Wallace acknowledged, however, that both were excellent economic statisticians. Quote, Pollock, end quote, was in fact called Pollock, but the names can admittedly be difficult to distinguish in American pronunciation. For Pollock, the man in the 3-piece suit and bow tie, this evening in February 1943 marked the zenith of his endeavors. His friend Max Horkheimer congratulated him on this extraordinary, quote, opportunity to listen in on conversations of historical importance, end quote. Pollock was certainly pleased. The now decades-long quest for a better place had taken Pollock from tranquil Freiburg, Breisgau, through half of Europe, all the way to the White House. Pollock now had an opportunity to present his ideas and plans to the most powerful man on earth, even if, as yet, only his wife was actually paying attention. Pollock explained at great length that only the creation of a, quote, true democracy, end quote, in Germany would secure peace in the long term. Pollock appreciated that some in the State Department and the armed forces would rather establish a military administration, yet this would offer only a short-term solution. In the long run, there was a risk that Europe would turn, quote, either communist or fascist, end quote, once the occupation forces withdrew. The First Lady listened attentively, but the President was evidently irked by Pollock's preachiness. Back home, Trude Lasch, one of Eleanor Roosevelt's closest associates, like Pollock, a native of Freiburg, so it probably is Trude Lasch, told her husband that, quote, the Germans were not as clear and good as last time. The White House, the Vice President, and the President proved too much. Their manner was too professorial, and in the end, the President asked them to prepare school books, thus treating them as schoolmasters, which distressed Pollock especially. It turns out she need not have been all that concerned. Pollock was invited back. So how did Friedrich Pollock, of all people, come to be invited to dinner at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest? What kind of life had led Pollock from an apartment located above a small shop for women's apparel in central Freiburg to the heart of 20th century political power? End of prelude. Introduction. In 1963, Max Horkheimer published a short article in West Germany's most prestigious daily, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, to mark the 70th birthday of his closest associate and lifelong friend, Friedrich Pollock. Quote, that Friedrich Pollock, ... is known only as a scholar, end quote. He wrote, quote, can be explained only by his profound modesty. However useful his scholarly legacy may prove in assessing crucial economic and social issues, Pollock's practical impact on the emergence, evolution, and renewal of the social sciences in Germany, not least in saving individual social scientists in the years of persecution, amounts to a significant chapter in the history of this long-neglected discipline. a detailed account of the life he devoted in so much greater measure to duty than to his own well-being, notably in supporting theoretical endeavors and institutions, would make a valuable contribution to our understanding of intellectual developments in the last half-century." End quote. Max Horkheimer. The words Horkheimer chose to express his profound respect for Pollock may have a hagiographical undertone, but they nevertheless make for an entirely appropriate point of departure for this book. Of course, Horkheimer's claim raises the question of why, then, this is the first biography of the man. The explanation lies not least in Pollock's aforementioned, quote, profound modesty, end quote. As West Germany's foremost political weekly, Der Spiegel, noted in its obituary for Pollock following his death on the 16th of December 1970, quote, "The co-founder of the Frankfurt Institute for Social Research consciously stayed in the shadows of his great friend Max Horkheimer, whose lifelong helper and mayordomo he was. As the Institute's organizer and financial administrator, Pollock established branches in London, Geneva, and Paris in the early 1930s, thus securing the Institute's ability to continue working after Hitler came to power, ... Pollock was an economist, and his publications earned him a reputation as an expert on Marxist economics. In retirement, Pollock was Horkheimer's neighbor in Montagnola. He died there on Wednesday before last." End quote. Der Spiegel. To be sure, Der Spiegel did credit him with a, quote, reputation as an expert on Marxist economics, end quote. Even so, Pollock the scholar, according to Horkheimer, supposedly the only capacity in which he was known, plays only a marginal role in this obituary. It portrayed Pollock primarily as an organizer and financial administrator, a neighbor and major domo. What the hell does that mean? According to Wikipedia, a major domo is a person who speaks, makes arrangements, or takes charge for another. Typically, this is the highest major person of a household staff, a head servant who acts on behalf of the owner of a large or significant residence. A major domo may also, more informally, be someone who oversees the day-to-day responsibilities of a business enterprise. Historically, many institutions and governments, monasteries, cathedrals, and cities, as well as noble and royal houses, also had the post of major domo, who usually was in charge of finances. Additionally, the Hispanos of New Mexico used the related term mayordomo to refer to the manager of an acequia system for a town or valley. Also, when translated into English, quote, mayordomo, end quote, means butler. Or major domo means butler. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. Let's see.
Major domo.
All right, I'm rolling with that. It portrayed Pollock primarily as an organizer and financial administrator, a neighbor and major domo, and it is in just these terms that he has for the most part, been profiled in the historiography of the Frankfurt School. In this light, Horkheimer's appreciation seems to amount to no more than one friend doing another a good turn, a close companion's gushing praise. In this book, I show that Pollock was indeed infinitely more than a major domo, that he helped shape the intellectual profile of the Institute in decisive ways, both theoretical and practical, and, far from least, that he was instrumental in saving and assisting dozens of German Jewish intellectuals seeking to flee Nazi Germany and Nazi-occupied Europe. Like all individuals who merit a biographer's attention, Pollock was a man of various small but not so small contradictions. Pollock was the son of a factory owner, yet wanted to abolish private property. a professor who did not publish extensively, an economist who incurred substantial losses on the stock exchange, a man from the German provinces of Baden who eventually felt at home only in American English, a communist who considered Marxism anachronistic, a Jew who wanted nothing to do with Judaism or Jewish peoplehood, and finally a critical intellectual who believed that his lifelong friendship covenant with Horkheimer provided space for the anticipatory realization of the good life. Far from trying to smooth over these contradictions, I do my level best to portray Pollock's warts and all, presenting both his strengths and weaknesses and the turns, twists, and false starts that shape the often convoluted course of his life. I have endeavored to provide sufficient political, cultural, and intellectual context to allow readers to understand Pollock as, as parenthesis, in Marx's terms, end parenthesis, the ensemble of social relations he, like all individuals, was. That said, important as context is for the interpretation of an individual's specific decisions, actions, and ways of thinking, neither are individuals merely a cross-section of omnipotent personal forces. The havoc wrought by modernity may have profoundly fractured the individual, but my account remains committed to the assumption that individuals maintain the ability to deviate from and transgress established norms and express their individuality by setting themselves against the mainstream. Mine is not the kind of biography that supposedly accounts for an entire century on the back of a single individual. Instead, I focus emphatically on the life of one extraordinary individual in an age of enormous catastrophes, conflicts, and transformations, and his sometimes idiosyncratic responses to these shocks and wider developments more generally. No student of the history of German sociology, Western Marxism, the so-called Frankfurt School, or the German Jewish emigre community in the United States will be oblivious to Pollock. His name constantly pops up in the relevant literature, and even more so in the primary source material, yet Pollock has continued, to quote Wiggershaus, to be the final enigma among the members of the Frankfurt School. When Wiggershaus made this diagnosis in 1994, Wiggershaus hoped it might draw attention to Pollock, but little has been added to his brief biographical sketch in the intervening years, nor is Pollock really much better known now than he was then. Pollock continues to be overshadowed by the stars of critical theory, foremost among them Theodor W. Adorno, Walter Benjamin, Max Horkheimer, and Herbert Marcuse. Only diehards are familiar with at least some aspects of Pollock's theoretical work, and he rarely makes it out of the footnotes even of works on the Frankfurt School. It is high time indeed to do justice to his significant contribution, both theoretical and practical, to the development of critical theory. This desideratum is all the more startling insofar as Pollock, as co-founder and deputy director, was absolutely central to the Institute's development even in purely formal terms. The 6-volume edition of his collected works, whose publication began in 2018, will hopefully help intensify interest in his work. The publication of Horkheimer's collected works in the 1980s and 1990s has done wonders in this respect. Some editions also help create a better balance between context and immanence, between the external influences and internal dynamics, the continuities and discontinuities that shaped an individual author's thought over time. This makes it easier to profile their specificity as an original thinker who both influenced and was influenced by their peers, in Pollock's case, the field of critical theory and a number of other significant authors. No longer reduced to the auxiliary role of throwing light on his better-known colleagues, Pollock's life turns out to be every bit as exciting and fascinating as that of his more prominent peers. Pollock was torn between two continents, between revolutionary yearning and realpolitical skepticism, between theoretical pessimism and a utopian lifestyle, between cosmopolitan self-definition and being identified by others as a Jew, between the desire to implement his ideas, convictions, and dreams, and the need to confront an increasingly hostile environment. It was the need to make sense of and come to terms with These tensions that motivated, drove, and sustained the symbiotic covenant of friendship between Pollock and Horkheimer that invariably has to take center stage in any account of Pollock's life and work. These tensions are also reflected in Pollock's version of critical theory. Pollock was keen to theorize on a broad empirical basis in a way that made it possible to anticipate emerging social trends. This exposed Pollock to a far greater risk of being disproven than run-of-the-mill social scientists who simply work descriptively. Some of Pollock's prognoses have turned out to be wrong, or at least overblown. Others may have sounded like something straight out of science fiction at the time, and yet they are as acute today as they ever were. The, quote, revolution of the robots, end quote, is a case in point. They may originate in a different age that will strike many as strange and distant, but many of Pollock's ingenious and highly prescient analyses regarding issues such as the increasing economic superfluousness of human individuals, accelerating automation and expanding bureaucracies, issues whose import was only partially discernible at the time, speak in a helpful way to some of our most important current concerns. Pollock very much hoped that his legacy might help future scholars make sense of the world in substantive ways. In this sense, I hope that this biography can do more than draw attention to an individual owed far greater engagement as a historical figure than he has hitherto received. Ideally, it will help do what all works of intellectual history ultimately should, bring the intellectual contribution of its subject back into contention. The end. Thank you for listening.